Hey there, amazing students, and welcome to week 6. Whew. Time really does fly when we're having fun, right? Nonetheless, we're going to dive into week 6. I'm going to do an overview for you. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm actually going to do a little teaching moment here. This video is probably going to be a little bit longer than the previous ones. Just for frame of reference, I try to keep these at 10 minutes or less, and I know there's been a couple of updates that have been in the 12 to 13 range. I do apologize for that. Sometimes it's one of those things, where I'm judging getting the information out versus the time frame. Today, I'm just telling you straight up, this one's going to be longer, okay? You can certainly use the option to play me a little bit faster where I sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks, or you can pause it, rewind it, whatever you need to do. So in addition to that, in an effort to save time, I'm going to attempt to do this unedited. So I've laid some things out and created some notes. So hopefully I can go through this more like a lecture as opposed to editing it. Honestly, the editing part just takes time. So I have so much going on. This is just a little more, live, if you will. So I do have my notes. I'm going to lick my fingers. Okay, so we're going to dive into week 6, and I talked to a couple students, both through emails. I had a couple of phone conversations with some students and just kind of coaching them through some various aspects. And I know one of the things that I'm seeing, even in terms of grading, is some students are kind of struggling a little bit with using the research and how to use it and things of that nature. So I thought I'd give you a little lesson on some of the basics through reading you some excerpts of something that I personally wrote. And this will help you with a little bit of a history lesson to boot in terms of the content, but I'm sure you're going to enjoy the history that we're talking about, because I'm going to talk about the history of the DSM in this writing and kind of the evolution and the creation with it. So here we go. I want to just point out a couple of things in terms of how I used the text citations and what these actually mean in pulling this information together for this document that I'm about to read you. Now, I do want to stress this at the outset, and this is one thing that I think a lot of students miss in terms of research and how to use the research. As I go through these articles, Clark, Watson, Reynolds, American Psychiatric Association, Francis and Edgar, APA, Butler and Malik, Blashfield, kind of go through a lot of these, Botzrick and Nomberg, Francis and Edgar. So just keep those in mind. There's many, many more. Just kind of pointing those out, and read that long list just to kind of show you and demonstrate to you that as I'm writing something and I'm telling you about all these things, I've already read these articles first. So I want to stress that, because I think what happens sometimes is students have an idea of what they want to write, and then they go to find some research that fits what they're thinking. Not the way to do it, gang, for a couple of reasons. First, you open your mind up to new ideas. That's always a good thing. You certainly don't have all the information, and you want to make sure that you're allowing the research to guide you in many cases. Now, with what we're doing in this class, of course, you are putting some opinions out there. You are sharing some insights, but also, and I'll talk about this in a minute as I get into that, incorporate the research to help you make decisions in what you're going to say or how you say it. And I'll talk about this in a moment. So I just wanted to give you a frame of reference. I read all this stuff first, and I allow everything I just read to guide what I write. That's how this works. Within any scientific field, placing subjects into categories is important for classification of research. Okay, this was some information that I gleaned when I read this article from Clark, Watson, and Reynolds. It also is something that was said in an article very similar to that. This is a summary of information from an article that I read from the American Psychiatric Association. Now, I'm not expecting you guys to reference at this level or have dual sources that say the same information, and this is something you will definitely want to have as you go into grad school. When you have two sources that say the similar thing and you're paraphrasing that information, that strengthens your argument by putting two things in there. Now, here's the thing, gang. I know this off the top of my head. You all know this, right? If we take a bunch of like items and we put it into categories, here's all the blue ones, here's all the green ones, here's all the red ones, it will help, right? It's going to help us to sort and organize what we're doing. So it would make sense that we take a lot of people that have depression and we study them in this category and anxiety and so on and so forth, and that's how we would create the diagnostic system, right? Great. That's a no-brainer. But notice how I took information from two sources because I want to strengthen that argument. In the field of psychiatry, I got to see, it really is live. In the field of psychiatry, placing patients into definable categories is critical for proper diagnosis, treatment, research, and third-party reimbursement. Nearly every civilization in history has created a model for classification of human behavior. For the obvious reasons, unpredictable or uncontrollable actions can be disruptive to individuals and society. Use of a label can provide emotional comfort, albeit only psychological, and a sense of controlling the uncontrollable. Francis and Edgar. So all of this information from here down to here is a paraphrasing, or really more of a summary of a lot of stuff that I read in this article. And again, I've read all this information. Now I'm piecing it together as I'm writing my stuff. Okay, now I'm going back to something that I talked about earlier. Before the release of the first DSM, psychologists would attempt to define abnormal behavior based upon their own personal training and thought of the use of through the use of developed nomenclatures. That came from an article I already talked about earlier, and because I said it again, I had to reintroduce this. Technically, I know why I put the year in there, because I have several documents from that. So a lot of times if you use it again in the same thing, you wouldn't put the year in unless there was a specific reason. And because there's so much information I put in from American Psychiatric Association, APA, American Psychological Association, APA, I wanted to be real specific on all of this stuff, so didn't confuse the issue. But normally when you cite the same article in the same paragraph for the second time, because I use some other information in the middle, I would use the reference again. I would just exclude the year just to make it a little easier. However, this practice had many inconsistencies, as a diagnosis would be based upon the personal experiences of the treating clinician, which often varied based upon his or her own clinical environment or the geographic location of the mental health facility. So I want to clarify something as I share this, because it's kind of cool in terms of history, but it's also a little applicable to what we're doing in this class. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, so in this particular section, I was talking about how prior to the DSM, what would happen is somebody in Washington, state of Washington, would see somebody, for example, that had depression, and they would look at it and they would classify something and call it something really obscure. And then somebody else in Florida, I'm just using two opposites of the country, would see something very similar, but they would have an entirely different name for it. So imagine communicating between two people and calling it two different things, or doing research and nobody's evaluating the same thing because nobody has a clear understanding of what we're talking about. So we put things into classification so we can say, here is a general framework that we're working with. We also have the ability to take the research now and say, this is why it is this. Does that make sense? So instead of relying on varying opinions, we now have some structure and order or classification of it, and we have the research to support the findings. Okay, so again, the opinion part is what I've been talking about in terms of where we use subjective stuff, as a lot of you are introducing a lot of opinions and a lot of subjective information and saying, okay, well, it fits this question. But I'm probably seeing it a different way. I'm seeing it through the filter of, racking my brain to try to figure out how course content or some of your program content would have fit what you're talking about. And in some cases it fits, and in some cases it doesn't. And so I want you guys to be clear on that. You want to provide that kind of justification as we're talking about. And again, tying it back here to instead of the varying opinions. All right. Clinical descriptions of mental illness may have likely been around since the beginning of time, according to Blashfield. The Bible identifies clinical depression in Psalms 102, seen in symptoms of hopelessness, despair, isolation, poor appetite, and a lack of energy. However, the ancient Egyptians and Sumerians are believed to be the first societies to identify melancholia, hysteria, and psychiatric illness as early as 2600 BC in India. Averic, the study of life medicine, introduced a psychiatric nosology into the medical classification in 1400 BC. Wow, I'm just reading right through periods, aren't I? And both Hippocrates and Plato created models to identify psychiatric disorders in ancient Greece around 400 BC. Hippocrates' system was largely based on the humoral theory, which was considered a diagnostic zeitgeist throughout Europe during the Middle Ages. And again, to reference. Now, I'm not going to continue reading on, gang, so I'll spare you the rest of that information. But I wanted you to kind of see how intertwining this can be with your information. And again, I read the information first, I digest that information, I'm taking notes as I'm reading an article, and I'm putting that together with bits and pieces from other articles to write something new. That is your aspiration. That's your goal. That's when you read a journal article and it's like they reviewed a few other articles. That's exactly what they did. When you read a study, they read 3, 4, 5 studies to talk about the literature review, and I have something like that in here somewhere. There's a literature review section where you're piecing together all the information from all the findings as it's related to what you're talking about, and then you do your study. Then you have your primary research in there. And so these are some of the things you want to think about when you're writing. And again, you want to structure your written submission in such a way so that it is really consistent straight on through. Notice the references are all consistent straight on through. The margins are consistent all the way through. And again, I want to kind of give you guys an aspirational vision for working towards something to see how this pieces together in terms of your writing style. I'm not expecting you guys to write at this level and be perfect, although there are some aspects that should be a little bit better. Okay, so I want to leave it at that, and I want to dive back into some of the stuff that we're talking about this week, and I hope that helped as we move forward here. And I also wanted to talk about a concept that you guys are all, you folks, I should say, are all going to be working with this week. And that's a fixed versus a growth mindset. And as you go through the submissions for this week and the things that you're going to be accountable for, we're going to talk about some of these things and reference back to this, as this is really ingrained into the topics for the week. So when we look at a fixed mindset, think in terms of someone who avoids those challenges, tends to give up easy when things just hit them. You know, they might be working towards something and making some small gains and just saying, well, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm never going to get any place. You know, they're very negative about that. They tend to be, kind of defend things when they're criticized. They avoid that feedback. They push away from it. They might feel threatened by others. These are people that are just kind of in one place, kind of stuck in that mindset, and push everything away, so to speak, in terms of learning or growth. Now, hopefully, nobody here is in that place, because if you are, I can tell you, you're choosing the wrong career path, because in this field, you're constantly learning and growing. You're constantly seeing things in a different way, and constantly taking classes and continuing ed and all that kind of stuff. And so We are always in a growth mindset as a psychology, but that growth mindset generally embraces the challenges, looks for opportunities for growth. No matter what happens, they just keep going, or better, they find a different way to go about it. They see effort as a path to mastery, so the obstacles along the way are really just lessons towards getting better at this. They seek feedback and learn from it, learn from others, and they partner and learn from the success of others as well. And so I want you guys to keep this, I want you all to keep this in mind this week as we go through the materials. Do make sure that when you're going through the submissions, you're kind of skimming through all the information that's geared up for the week so you're not overlooking anything. This will help you to map out your week, plan, budget, schedule, etc. The learning, the week 6 modules, good idea. Go through this, read through this. You're going to have a good understanding what the objectives are for the week, and so on and so on. And I think most of you are pretty well versed into doing this stuff. But let me talk specifically about the readings for this week: Authentic Leadership and Social Change. So this course doesn't really have any textbooks, and you've probably had few, if any, courses that's either had some type of digital textbook built into the course, or possibly that, or some type of actual hold in your hand textbook. So either way, that's typical with college classes until you get into courses like this. That's more of a capstone course where you're going to have a lot of readings or videos. You're going to have a lot of this stuff, but you're reading this stuff, learning from this stuff, as opposed to a separate textbook. I can tell you, in looking at the assignments this week, if you read and go through all of this stuff first, it will be easier for you to complete the assignments. That's just how it works, folks. So there are a couple things that pointed out, and a lot of these videos and stuff you might have on in the background, maybe while you're doing something else. You know, there is times when you can double dip, so to speak. You got two things going on, and you've got this video playing, because it's not important that you watch Carol walk across the stage while she's talking, but that you're hearing what she's talking about. Sometimes they show images and things like that. Carol Dweck's very important this week. Daniel Goldman this week, and Samantha Chris. There was one other. Simon Sinek is critical that you talk or go in that direction this week, because there's a lot of things that's going to be talked about in some of these videos that we're going to address this week, both in the discussion board and the assignment. To go back to my notes, but definitely going to reflect on leadership styles and aspirations. Now, I have taught 100 courses. I like to say it this way. I've taught 100 courses on motivational psychology. Literally, it's been more than 100 courses. So people say, I've done this 1,000,000 times. I've done this over 100 times for certain. Taught classes on motivational psychology over and over and over again. And I can tell you that some of these principles you'll learn about this week are key. I want you to reflect on your leadership styles as you're going into this week. That's going to be important. You know, note that individual styles are highly influenced by psychological concepts, our social dimensions, and things of that nature. A lot of the research, a lot of the things that we read, a lot of the things that we aspire to do. So reflect on your whys. Let me talk about the assignments in specific. In your own words, define leadership and describe its relevance to social change agency. Now, I want to stress this. Everybody hear this. Just because it says in your own words does not mean that you should invent something random off the top of your head. Use your own words to talk about what this means to you, and you can certainly bring in some validation by adding some research. Something from what you just read or watched could be really helpful, because you just read and learned from some of the top people in the field. Okay, so do that. That would be really good. Talking about something that's personal to you that may not be well known to other people would carry more validity if you had some validation to it, i.e. some research, some support. What aspects of personality or lived experience inspire the leader in you? Similar thing. And again, you know, if it's very common, if it's understandable, makes sense, that's obviously a lot better. But if it's random and obscure, that could be a problem. As a leader of a team working to achieve a goal, workplace, or community, describe how you would promote communication, collaboration, and motivation. As a leader of a team working to achieve a goal in the workplace, yada, 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 does not say create some random idea off the top of your head in 10 seconds and throw out a statement. Be with this for a moment. You've just listened to and read from some of the top people in the field. I'm sure you would get some ideas. And then as we get into some of the other things, emotional intelligence, self-care, social justice, and again, a lot of you are familiar with this type of stuff. But again, if you've done the readings this week and watched the videos, this is really easy for you. Module 6, milestone and guidelines, same type of thing. If you've done the readings and the video, this is really easy. Carol Dweck, she's awesome. Okay, watch her videos, read her stuff. Very simple. Describe how growth versus fixed mindset affects personal development. Duh, I just opened with that. So again, pull in this information. Describe why the difference between tyranny now and power of yet. Okay, critical to professional development. That's where you're headed. Describe what potential stages could be used to promote the development of growth mindset environment in the professional stages. Okay, so talk about some of these strategies that could be effective. How would you apply Dweck's assertions in your efforts to lead others? Again, bring it down, make it easy. Bringing in the research, I can promise you, will make it very, very easy for you. You don't have to create this off the top of your head. There's Carol Dweck. Her stuff is really good. That's what they were talking about specifically in the milestone. The milestone is not opinion-based, guys. It is research-driven. So you certainly will have your own ideas and vision, but make sure you're supporting make sure you have some support for what you're talking about. And keep in mind that describe is more than one sentence or one bullet point in some cases. Describing is, give me a picture of what that looks like to you. Not a literal picture, but a word-based picture. And you can do it in a, paragraph, 5 sentences, 6 sentences, something like that. I'm not saying that's actually that's the milestone. Milestone. I was thinking discussion post. The milestone. You can talk about each one of these in a paragraph. And when I say a paragraph is like, around 5 sentences. Actually, for the wordsmiths out there, I think it is 5 sentences is the rule. But I'm not saying I'm going to specifically look at this and say, oh, you don't have enough sentences. That's not where I'm coming from this. But I think what happens is some students write, describe how a growth versus fixed mindset affects professional development. And then they say their first sentence will start out by saying a growth mindset is important in professional development over a fixed mindset, and then period. And then the next sentence is it's like the restatement of the first sentence. And so that's great. That's fine. I love that you guys did that, but don't count that as sentence number 1 and then put 2 additional sentences and think that that's a paragraph. So I'm just being honest. Okay? Think in terms of a little more depth for what you all are doing here. All right. You guys, you folks are overall doing a really good job in the 2 to 4 sentences per question. That's what it talks about, but expand your thoughts. When it says 2 to 4 sentences, as I back up, I shouldn't have said 2 at all. Think in terms of 4 sentences And the main reason why I stress this is not to push you and twist your arm and write more and do more work. I honestly don't, because when you all write more, it's more work for me. You're writing one paper, I'm going to grade 17 of them. So every paragraph longer is like, I'm telling you all now to take your half a page and turn it to a page. No, I'm kidding. The reason why I want you to write a little bit more is because in some cases there have been some students that met the 2-sentence thing but didn't really address the question, and that's the more important part of this. So if it took you 5 sentences to answer the question, then please do that, or 6 sentences. But you don't need to write a whole page on each one. If you wrote a half a page on each one, that would be plenty by far. So think in those terms. Will probably be shorter than that. All right, the video this week is, you're going to see a familiar face on there, so I wanted to make mention to that, or kind of point that out. It's not the same video we watched, but a different version. And then I just want to move ahead real quick to put this on your radar, because very important, gang. This week's going to feel a little bit lighter in comparison to what you had last week and the week before, which seemed maybe a little heavier because we were doing those projects. They're a little bit bigger. There's a lot more going on. This week, we do have a discussion board. Okay, we do have a milestone, but it's feeling a little bit lighter because it is, but I want you to stay in that mindset of working forward, because you're going to want to be ready. In Module 8, you're going to turn in Project 3, so take a look at that so you're on track to do that, because it is going to be something that will require some time and energy from you. You're also going to want to be mindful of the portfolio assignment that is going to start next week and run into week 8 as well, but this is going to take you a little bit of time regarding your portfolio, and you're also going to want to make sure you're going through these things and everything's lined up and well supported in your portfolio. You got the right things in there. You know, we're really looking for stuff that's really, you know, kind of shows your best foot, so to speak. Think in terms of, one of the things I want to stress to you about the ePortfolio as I was going through the assignments this week and thinking about some of this stuff is, this stuff would have been so incredibly helpful had I had this when I was doing it. Had I had something that says, oh, you're applying to graduate school, here's a packet, there you go. Or have the packet and then just pull a few things out that are needed from whatever I'm doing, would have been very helpful, extremely helpful. Now, many of us have something like this now. It's called a CV, and that's essentially what you are all building in some regard as a student. That's what you're building. Get used to it. You're going to need it in every single job you do moving forward as you go into a professional role in mental health. You're going to be putting a CV in somebody's hand every single time. People are going to see your grades, your transcripts, like everything you've done, they're going to see it. So put this stuff together, spend some time with it, put some energy into it. It's going to be really important. And then you're going to submit some of this stuff in week 7. So as I'm planting the seed here, got some extra time this week, it would be in your best interest to start at least chipping away a little bit on week 7 and week 8 as we get into Project 3. And then there's some other aspects of the ePortfolio in terms of stuff that you're going to want to make sure that's included. And then we're going to get a little bit into the bio and things of that nature, just briefly on that stuff. Now, I'm not an expert in the ePortfolio career stuff. There are resources available to you. If you need some help with that, shoot me an email. But as you read through this, the SNHU career team can offer guidance on your ePortfolio, and all those links are available to you in Brightspace. So again, if you need some help with that, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to help you. But again, if you start popping around into some of these tools and resources, you're going to find connections to all of that. So reach out if you need some help. Overall, that wasn't too bad. I think about 30 minutes, and I do apologize for the longer than expected video, but I know we're going into a tough week, and I know there was some questions about some of the stuff that I covered, and I wanted to make sure and cover all the information related to the assignments. So make sure you're putting some time and energy into developing those submissions, meeting those objectives, supporting your statements, your arguments. That would be really great. Reach out if you do have some questions. I look forward to a lively discussion board this week, and have an awesome week.